A tariff exceeding 130% is not merely a number, it is more like a trade wall that nearly shuts the door to a market for an export product. According to a recent preliminary conclusion by the US Department of Commerce, reinforcing steel bars from Vietnam are facing anti-dumping duties of up to 121.97% for the investigated companies and 130.77% for the remaining exporters. Compared with other countries under the same investigation, such as Bulgaria and Egypt, these tariff rates are significantly higher, making Vietnam the most heavily affected case in this investigation. Information released by the Trade Remedies Authority under Vietnam's Ministry of Industry and Trade shows that this is only a preliminary conclusion. However, the announced tariff rates immediately drew significant attention from economists and export businesses. In the context of Vietnam's steel exports to the US market growing rapidly in recent years, this move is widely seen as a clear signal that Washington is tightening its trade remedy measures. The issue does not stop with the steel industry alone. Many experts believe that this record-high tariff level reflects a broader reality, as Vietnamese goods continue to expand their market share in the United States. The risk of facing trade barriers increases accordingly. This raises a major question: why the United States is increasingly using trade defense measures against Vietnamese products, and whether this could be part of a longer-term protection strategy by the world's largest economy. The developments of the case show that this is not an unexpected decision, but rather part of the US trade remedy investigation process. According to the released information, the US Department of Commerce, DOC, initiated an anti-dumping investigation into reinforcing steel bars imported from Vietnam following a complaint filed by the domestic steel industry. During this process, the DOC selected one Vietnamese company as the mandatory respondent, while also reviewing data from several related enterprises, including companies under the Hoa Phat Group such as Hoa Phat Dong Quat, Hoa Phat Hai Duong, and Hoa Phat Hung Yen. This is a common procedure in US trade investigations, where authorities select a representative company in order to calculate the dumping margin for the entire industry. The preliminary conclusion following the initial investigation set tariff rates that are considered extremely high, around 121.97% for the mandatory respondent and its affiliated companies, while other Vietnamese exporters face duties of up to 130.77%. These figures immediately attracted attention because they far exceed the tariff levels imposed on several other countries involved in the same investigation. In international trade practice, tariffs exceeding 100% are almost equivalent to shutting products out of the import market, since the post-tariff price would increase several times compared to the original cost, making it extremely difficult for the goods to remain competitive. However, when looking more closely at the trade context in recent years, Washington's move can be partly explained. Statistics show that Vietnam's exports of reinforcing steel bars to the United States have grown very rapidly in a short period of time. If in 2022 the export volume was still relatively small, within just 2 years the figure surged to tens of thousands of tons, with a total value reaching tens of millions of US dollars. This strong growth rate has made Vietnamese steel products increasingly visible in the construction materials supply chain in the US market. For domestic manufacturers, especially companies in the highly competitive steel industry, the rapid increase in imports is often seen as a sign of pressure on domestic market share and pricing. It is precisely at this intersection that anti-dumping tariff cases often begin. Within the US trade system, industry associations and businesses have the right to request a government investigation if they believe imported goods are being sold at abnormally low prices and are causing damage to domestic producers. Once a complaint is accepted, the Department of Commerce, DOC, will collect data, calculate the dumping margin, and announce provisional tariff rates. Therefore, the tariff level of over 120 to 130% in the reinforcing steel case can be viewed as the result of an investigation carried out in accordance with established procedures, while also reflecting concerns within the US steel industry over the increasing supply from overseas. From a broader perspective, Many experts suggest that such measures are closely linked to the strong resurgence of trade protectionism in US economic policy. The steel industry has long been regarded as a strategic sector, as it is directly tied to infrastructure, heavy industry, and even national defense. Consequently, protecting domestic steel mills carries not only economic significance, but is also intertwined with issues of employment and social stability in industrial states. Areas once known as the Rust Belt have witnessed numerous plant closures in the past, and tough trade policies are often viewed as a means to prevent such a scenario from recurring. Another factor that cannot be overlooked is the issue of the trade deficit. The United States has maintained a large trade deficit for many consecutive years, and Vietnam as a market economy in anti-dumping investigations. This causes the Department of Commerce, DOC, to apply a calculation methodology different from that used for many other nations. Instead of using production costs directly from Vietnam, the investigating authority often relies on data from a surrogate country with a similar level of development to estimate value. In many cases, this approach drives the dumping margins significantly higher than they would be in reality, leading to the triple-digit tariffs seen in the current case. Looking at the overall picture, the investigation from a broader perspective, this case illustrates a familiar reality in trade relations between Vietnam and the United States. Trade remedy measures are no longer a rare phenomenon. Over the past 2 decades, many of Vietnam's key export industries have faced similar investigations, sometimes with tariffs even higher than the 130% plus figure currently drawing attention in the steel reinforcing bar rebar case. For instance, in the timber industry, a recent case involving hardwood plywood products captured significant public attention when the US Department of Commerce announced a preliminary anti-dumping duty of nearly 195%. When combined with other anti-subsidy duties, the total tax rate faced by enterprises could reach approximately 200%. This figure demonstrates the stringency of trade remedy measures that Washington is prepared to apply when it deems that imports are causing injury to domestic manufacturing. The steel industry is no exception. Prior to the current investigation into steel reinforcing bar, various other Vietnamese steel products have repeatedly been entangled in US investigations, ranging from corrosion-resistant steel and galvanized steel to hot-rolled steel coils. In each case, preliminary tax rates were typically set at very high levels, exerting significant pressure on exporting enterprises. However, it is worth noting that the final outcomes in many instances do not entirely mirror the initial findings at the beginning of the investigative process. Consequently, many experts argue that trade defense has become an almost normal part of the global trade game. As an exporting nation increases its volume of goods into major markets, the likelihood of facing anti-dumping or anti-subsidy investigations grows accordingly. In the context of Vietnam's expanding market share across various developed economies, becoming embroiled in trade lawsuits is therefore no longer a matter of surprise. From another perspective, it is important to note that the tariff rates mentioned in the steel reinforcing bar case are merely preliminary findings. According to the US investigative procedure, the subsequent phase typically involves issuing supplemental questionnaires, conducting on-site verifications, and re-examining all data submitted by the enterprises. This is a crucial process to verify the accuracy of the information and to adjust the dumping margin calculations if necessary. During this stage, enterprises have the opportunity to provide more detailed explanations regarding their production costs, pricing structures, and export activities. If the provided data is comprehensive and persuasive, the final tariff rates could potentially be reduced significantly compared to the initial figures. Past case history shows that many Vietnamese enterprises have successfully turned the tide, converting very high preliminary tax rates into much lower levels in the final results.